whatever you're trying to achieve across different sections of an organization and measuring each organization and then showing the leaders of each organization how they're doing side by side with their peers who are leaders of the other departments. All of a sudden, they're like, I don't look so good next to Amy. Well, I'm going to change that.
Hey everyone, it's Amy Lynn Durham, and you're listening to Create Magic at Work. Create Magic at Work is on a mission to equip senior leaders with tools they need to be a true quantum leader and actually understand what that means. Improve employee engagement, retain top talent, and transform your workplace culture to have less drama and stress. So let's start making magic. Hey everyone, welcome to Create Magic at Work. Today, I have Dr. Richard Safir, the Chief Medical Director of Employee Health and Wellbeing at Johns Hopkins Medicine with us. He's also an Assistant Professor of Medicine and Public Health at Johns Hopkins University and adjunct faculty at American University. Workplace health and well-being thought leader and pioneer, Dr. Safir has worked in the employee health and well-being space for more than 2 decades. So I can't wait to hear what he has seen for 20 years in the workplace health and well-being space. He's a national speaker on the topic and is recognized as an expert in creating well-being cultures in the workplace. His book, titled A Cure for the Common Company, A Well-Being Prescription for a Happier, Healthier, and More Resilient Workforce, published by Wiley, is widely acclaimed. And we're going to talk about some of the recommends that he has in his book, A Cure for the Common Company, today with everyone. He's the first author to provide a step-by-step roadmap for creating a well-being culture that integrates science with practical solutions, as demonstrated by the numerous field-tested stories from successful companies that has used this. Dr. Safir, welcome to Create Magic at Work.
Thank you so much, Amy. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you because I have a lot of questions about a lot of this stuff. So
that's why I'm here. We're in good shape.
Yeah, the Create Magic at Work community is a community of listeners that really want to advocate for healthy leaders and healthy workplaces. And we are always seeking insights and ways that we can be the change makers and the edge walkers in this space. So I like how your book says that it's a step-by-step roadmap. But what I would like to start with is, can you tell us, through all of your years of experience, what you feel a well-being culture is in an organization?
Amy, I did not start in this field thinking about workplace culture. When I started reading about published articles in this space, it was around 1998, 99. Johnson & Johnson, DuPont, and they were talking about what we would expect them to talk about: physical fitness, biometrics, weight. It really wasn't until around 2010 where I started thinking about the culture as part of the solution, if not today, now I believe it's the foundation of the solution. Culture is the shared behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes of a group of people. And in the case of the workplace, the group of people is everybody who works there, from the frontline employee all the way up to the president. And so that shared behaviors, beliefs, and attitudes is around our health and well-being.
On that note, why is this something anyone in the workplace should care about? Why is it a competitive advantage for my company to focus on the well-being of its people?
Yes, and specifically the well-being culture. There's lots of research to show that when employees feel cared for, when they feel that their health and well-being is supported, they're more likely to be engaged, they're happier, they stay longer, so your turnover rate is lower. They're less likely to be injured on the job. Because they're healthier, they're going to draw less health plan claims. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Now, the reason why I strongly recommend that employers take the culture part as the foundation of their strategy is that most people can't just stop and go to a half-hour program during the workday. It's not realistic, not to mention that we don't put our health and well-being on hold those other 7.5 hours of the workday. It's something that we need to pay attention to throughout the day. And when you're in a culture where everyone's sharing healthy and well behaviors, healthy and well attitudes, healthy and well beliefs, then you're finding yourself working through the day in a supportive environment that optimizes your chances of having a positive emotional day as well as a healthy day.
There's a part of your book, A Cure for the Common Company, that talks about putting your own mask on first. And it also talks about the most costliest chronic disease, which is hypertension, which is caused by stressful environments. If I'm creating a workplace culture that is focused on well-being, what are some things that I need to do to put my own mask on first?
Yes, about 6 out of the 11 chapters have a little call-out box called "Put Your Own Oxygen Mask On First," because really, if you're not well, if you're not in a positive emotional state, then it's going to be really difficult to support the health and well-being of those around you. And that goes for your workplace as well as at home, as well as when you're out with your friends. So, absolutely, number one step is make sure you're healthy and well. Now, hypertension is one of the most common chronic diseases in the United States. Now, I can't speak to other countries. And in fact, I'm sure there are countries where hypertension is not the number one chronic disease. However, if your company has similar demographics to the average company in the United States, then hypertension is going to be a problem for your workforce, whether it's number one or number three or number five. And the cost associated, again, is going to be at the top of the list. There are so many factors that contribute to our blood pressure level, like our stress, how much sleep we're getting, how much movement we're getting, whether or not we're smoking, drinking alcohol, what kinds of foods. The list goes on and on. These are the same healthy choices or decisions that we make every day that can affect other chronic diseases. It just so happens that hypertension is the most common. So we can be starting to make progress with any of these depending on your own circumstance. When you work in a healthy and well culture, all systems are aligned to help you optimize the chances of keeping your blood pressure normal. So, Amy, can I give a couple examples?
Please. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to pull a virtual card. Okay. I know that you like to do this, right? It's part of the end of
Yeah.
So I want you to pull the card. You tell me which of the lifestyle factors I just listed. And if you want me, I'll list them again. You're going to pick one and we're going to use it as an example.
Okay. Well, what came to me as you were sharing everything was just the prevalence of alcohol in the corporate culture and the cocktail mixers and you've got to be there rubbing elbows to get the promotion and all of those things. That's really what came up for me while you were sharing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So rubbing elbows to get the promotion. Yeah, in some cultures, that's a little bit more of a problem than others. And for most of us who can sit back and look at what helps make a company successful, it's promoting those who are qualified to do the job great and not necessarily those who have a good buddy. Now, in order for that to succeed, there's got to be a decision maker who's going to be well grounded to look at the issue of fairness. So fairness is a well-being strategy. When we don't feel like we're being treated fairly, that increases our stress level. And so stress is one of the risk factors for high blood pressure. And so one of the things that an employer can do to help lower the stress of the workforce is to be very transparent of how and why people get promotions. They can also be very transparent as to how and why decisions are made around policies, about allocating budget dollars. Transparency helps people feel like they're being treated more fairly, which lowers stress levels, which can help keep people's blood pressure at a normal level. Now, Amy, you chose a very, very sophisticated example. So good for you for kicking my tires. But for other people, a more common stressful situation is deadlines. And in that case, I would ask people to kind of step back, whether you're a frontline employee or a team manager, and think about deadlines in the context of priorities. We often overlook setting and keeping priorities. And as a result, everything seems like an urgency, which causes us to feel stressed. It doesn't have to be that way. We have to be conscious of it. And a team needs to be conscious of it and design systems to make sure that everyone's aligned with the top three priorities. And then beyond the team, the department, and the entire organization.
Okay, so this is really cool because this is the first time someone has
Amy, you've worn me out, and we're only a few minutes into this. This is like you're taxing my brain.
But this is the first time on the show that someone has made the connection between transparency and stress, and then tying it to this chronic disease condition of hypertension. Really, really great connections there. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, I saw a quote the other day and I was like, okay, I have to ask this when we talk. And it was from a Harvard Business Review article. And it was saying that well-being cultures are carewashing their companies. And they're referring to carewashing as a misalignment between leaders portraying that they have a culture of care and well-being, but it's in stark contrast to the employees' actual daily experiences at work. And so now there's this new term called carewashing. And it said, hey, yoga classes and checking the box on mindfulness or in yoga classes or something like that is not going to cut it. Curious of your thoughts on that.
I've heard the phrase well-being washing. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's well-being washing or care washing, or if it's promotion washing. In other words, I'm just making this up because maybe I'll get into some article, but because, if an employer says something and doesn't believe it, then obviously it's not going to sit well with the employee population, whether it's in the well-being and health realm or the financial realm. This probably is a disconnect on a number of different levels. I happen to believe in people having good intent, so I have to believe that most leaders aren't trying to purposely mislead their workforce, but maybe I'm naive. And so I would just ask employers and team leaders to have a system in place where employees can give anonymous feedback about how the workplace is or is not supporting their health and well-being. As with any other topic where the decision makers want to learn more in order to make informed decisions, employees need to feel safe to truly express whether or not they're being supported in their health and well-being in a variety of levels. And so one way to get that anonymous feedback and to feel safe is to have a third party, engage in that process. And that way, if an employer is saying, hey, we're doing yoga and we're doing whatever, lunch and learn on low salt, the employees can actually give feedback about whether or not that's meeting their needs or not. And then you can determine, is it such a big gap that someone can now say that they're care washing, or actually are we kind of closely aligned and we're doing okay as a group?
What would you say to someone listening that is like really understands the cost, the benefits of having a workplace well-being culture, yet they feel like they're kind of pushing against the norm in their company or in their organization? And the projects, the deadlines, the goals. We have to hit this. We'll focus on well-being, but we have to hit these numbers this quarter for the shareholders. And we'll focus on that next quarter, but we got to stay up all night to finish this project. And then it's just this perpetual cycle that they never really get out of. What is your advice for someone that's like, gosh, I feel like I don't even know if I can help change anything?
Yeah, well, you need to be able to communicate with your constituent. And so if you've been trying to communicate one way, then I would say back up, adjust, and communicate a different way. Sometimes it's through using data. It can be data within your own company, or it can be data in other companies, or it can be stories, emotional. How do you draw in the emotional tie of the decision maker? Most often, it's a combination of the two. And so, who's ever the advocate, part of your job is to be really well versed in the art and science of health promotion, of workplace wellness, of employee health and well-being, whatever you want to call it, and make that connection. I have used so many different techniques, some successful, others not. And it's really been, for me, a matter of being able to step back and tailor the communication to the individual receiving the communication and the circumstance at hand. So depending on what deadline we're talking about that we're going to pull an all-nighter for, if it's a deadline for, let's say, a spreadsheet that involves math, hey, why don't you pull some literature about how many math mistakes are made by people who are tired, and just recognize that there are fewer errors when people are well rested. So why don't we actually stop at 11 p.m., which is still ridiculous, and reconvene at 7 a.m.? And that way we'll have a clear head, we'll be more efficient and less likely to make an error.
I really like how you are offering ways for all of us to be a force for change, as your book says, in the space that we're in. I think oftentimes we will think we just need to leave or become an entrepreneur. I mean, if things get really bad, if our health is getting affected, right? I mean, of course, some people have to really make that personal decision and totally understand. But I also think it's important to shine that light on, like, let's see what I can do here as far as like systemic change goes. I love also how you said not everything that you tried worked, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Listen, I very early in my career, I realized I needed to learn about organizational change. So I'm pretty well versed in individual behavior change, but 20 years ago, I was not versed in organizational change, and I spent time reading. And honestly, it's amazing. It works when you know what you're doing in organizational change. You will increase your batting average. Amy, one of my favorite techniques is looking at whatever you're trying to achieve across different sections of an organization and measuring each organization, and then showing the leaders of each organization how they're doing side by side with their peers who are leaders of the other departments. All of a sudden, they're like, I don't look so good next to Amy. Well, I'm going to change that. Or I'm doing great, but John is on my tail. I need to do a little more. So for anybody who's truly interested in the health and well-being of not only their self, but their team or a larger part of the organization, If you want to be as effective as possible as being a change agent, learn about organizational change.
That's a big piece of the Edgewalker work, is a deep dive into being a wise and effective change agent, understanding the archetypes of change and all of those things that are big. It's a big philosophy and tool with Create Magic at Work. So I'm wondering, I have a couple of questions that I'm curious about that I want to ask you. First, I want to take us back to 2 decades ago when you started this work. I'm trying to think back 2 decades ago when I was where I was in the workforce, and I don't know if I heard any chatter about employee well-being. It was like rise and grind, at least in the space I was in. Rise and grind and do it
Rise and
again
grind.
and don't complain. And yeah. So I just kind of want to hear, it feels encouraging that we're having these conversations on well-being, right? But on that note, what are the trends that you're sensing that are shaping the future?
It is encouraging. Everybody should be encouraged that more and more companies are at least having conversations about this. Whereas back in the late 1990s, it was very few. So, back in the 70s, there was a movement to have a culture of safety and occupational health and environmental health. And that's appropriate, right? People don't want to get hurt on the job. And that really stuck and it really did well. And probably, decade afterward, we started to see some movement in the employee health and well-being space. I can think of Johnson and Johnson and DuPont. And really, the early companies were very much focused on biometrics and what could be done to improve the numbers, with a lot of emphasis on physical fitness by Johnson and Johnson in particular, and that probably lasted for a good decade through maybe 2010. And when the evaluators, the scientists, were accumulating more and more data to see if this approach was making a difference and coming up with it's more the exception that it works than the rule, then we had a little bit of a rebranding. We went from workplace wellness to well-being, and so it really kind of broadened the mind to individuals being happier and doing yoga and being more relaxed. All good stuff. All good stuff. But it really wasn't measurable to a point where many organizational leaders were convinced that we were on the right path yet. And so, Amy, here we are spending like 20, 25 years, spending a lot of money and not having a convincing across the board data. And so what does a capitalist society do? We rebrand, right? We went from workplace wellness to well-being, and then all of a sudden we started to hear about workplace well-being culture. And I shared with you, it's no secret that I'm a big believer in the power of workplace well-being culture. However, my definition of workplace well-being culture is different than most companies who are selling workplace well-being culture. The trend now is for companies to be embracing this idea of culture, but how they're actually pursuing it varies. I will repeat, if you don't mind, the definition that I embrace, which is the shared behaviors, beliefs, and values of a common group of people. And only the common group of people, the workforce, can decide if they have shared behaviors, beliefs, and values that all point towards their health and well-being. That information needs to be determined through self-reported feedback, anonymous surveys. It's not a check the box. Sometimes people interpret a well-being culture to mean that they put a sign at the elevator bank that says stairs, pointing, there's an arrow toward the stairwell. Now, I believe that that's an effective strategy and there's literature to support it, but that does not constitute culture. I'll pause there because, as you see, I'm getting a little bit excited. I don't want to have to go check my blood pressure.
No, I appreciate the distinction, and I appreciate the call out for anonymous feedback. And I want to just highlight for anyone listening that has the power to distribute that anonymous feedback to really ensure that it's truly anonymous. I've been in many a corporate scenario where we did anonymous feedback surveys, and they quite frankly were not anonymous. It was like, what's your title, and what geographic part of the country are you in, but it's anonymous. And then the other
Yeah.
piece.
What are your
uh,
initials?
yeah. The other thing I keep thinking as you're sharing is, gosh, the leaders that we've talked a lot about employee well-being, employee experience, but also the leaders that are leading these teams are often the forgotten ones as well. And in spiritual intelligence, we talk about differentiating between empathy and compassion. And one of the things that I share is, and I see with a lot of clients, is they are burning themselves out as the empathic leader because they are trying to create a culture of well-being and health. Um, and as your book points to, they're not leading by example themselves because they're taking on everybody's stuff, right? They're taking on other people's things. With the empath, I always say observe, don't absorb. And in the workplace, it's like, oh, I'll take on this project and you guys can take the weekend off or whatever that looks like, right? The compassionate leader looks for ways that they can make systemic change to help everyone. So, I guess on that note, I wanted to just bring this up to you for anyone that's listening that feels they know what to do. They know that everything we're talking about makes sense, yet they're exhausted and they feel stuck. What is one thing they could do to maybe shift out of that space?
Sounds like they're not putting their own oxygen mask on. Now, I don't mean to sound contrite, but that's the reality. You're not going to last long at your job, yet alone in the game of life, if you're running yourself ragged. Now, Amy, the skill that came to my mind that I would use and have used and do use to not absorb other people's stress and other, I'm going to call it negative energy, negative karma, is mindfulness. I want to be in the moment. I want to be present with myself and the circumstances. It's not that I don't care for the people on my team. And I think if you surveyed them anonymously, they'd probably say I do all right with supporting them. And yet, I can't allow myself to extend that support outside of when I'm with them at my own expense, because I will then not be there to support them the next time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good, executive coaching question I would add to my tool belt is like, where are you extending yourself to where you feel depleted outside of like the normal parameters? And perhaps asking yourself, what's really true here? Is this something you really truly need to do? And what are we trying to, the hyperachiever? That's one of my saboteurs, right? The hyperachiever. And what is that hyperachiever really looking for? Because ultimately it's sabotaging at the end of the day our health and well-being. Gosh, I could ask you so many questions, but we're coming up. It's time to pull a message for everyone from the universe, from my journal prompt card deck from Create Magic at Work. Okay, let's see. Oh, well, I love what we got today. We got stay curious.
Ah,
And this, oh my gosh, this is so great for how we were talking about being a force for change, not being afraid to try things that sometimes they might not work. So the theme, if you're listening, is stay curious. Your affirmation is, instead of rushing to judgment, I stay curious and ask meaningful questions. Now, Dr. Safir, I'm going to ask you to give advice to me and everyone listening. What are some ways that we can ask meaningful questions in a curious way in the workplace towards building a culture of well-being?
Amy, so much of our health and well being is impacted by the people we work with, and most of us rarely recognize that connection. I think it's important that when we are feeling a certain emotion inside us, to ask ourselves why. Is it possible that that energy is coming from someone around us? Mood contagion is real. Our moods spread to each other. Our mood spreads to our coworkers, and our coworkers' mood spreads to us. So if we're not feeling quite right inside, ask oneself, be curious, why am I feeling this way? Is it from a coworker or our manager? If it is, if it's another person that's the source of you not feeling well, then the next curious question is, what will I do to adjust so that someone else's negative energy, their negative mood, is not causing me harm? I wish that for everybody, because for most of us, whether we work in a huge company or we're a solopreneur, we still work with other people inside or outside of our company. And it's very difficult to avoid mood contagion. You just want to be able to limit the negative impact of mood contagion when the mood is a mood that is harmful to your well being.
So good. I did not expect you to take it into that space. And I think that's something we all needed to hear really is how do we protect our energy? What are ways we can do it if we're feeling off? How do we tap in and check in as to what's that coming from? Clear all of those things. Such a good way to stay curious with how we're feeling and the energy around us. Thank you so much for sharing that. If people want to connect with you, learn more about your work, how can they reach out and connect with you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. You can also learn more about my work at richardsafir.com. If you don't think you can spell my name, you can you can look at the show highlights because I'm sure it's there. A cure for the common company, a well-being prescription for a happier, healthier, and more resilient workforce. I think the book will provide you new insight about how you can go through the workday and come out of it the other end happier and healthier than when you arrived that morning.
Love it. Thank you. One other thing I want to just mention regarding the book, we'll drop the link in the show notes and everything that you mentioned in the show notes so everyone can click on. But part of the book, I can't remember off my memory what exactly it was called, but the end of the book had ways to combat, I guess, what you call like bumps in the road when we're trying to create a workplace well-being culture. What were those called?
They were called culture killers.
There you go. Download the book because if you're like, gosh, how do I do this? Is a lot. I'm just trying to get through my work day. Wow. I really want you to take a look at that, read the culture killers, maybe try to work through those and really be a force for change with all of us. And we can't get it right every time, but if we try, I think we can really pave a way for a better future. And thank you, Dr. Safir, for being here and for sending some magic to everyone today.
Thanks for having me, Amy.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone and see you next time.